John chapter 19. Curtis, I believe, read just a few moments ago to kind of introduce the text. Let me introduce and build up to this incredible, immortal challenge issued by the most unlikely of people concerning Jesus that is as relevant and important today as it was then. John chapter 19, verse 1, Pilate then took Jesus and scourged him. And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and put a purple robe on him. And they began to come up to him and say, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and to give him slaps in the face. Pilate came out again and said to them, "Behold, I am bringing him out to you so that you may know that I find no guilt in him." Jesus then came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." Father, this morning we come to you, Lord, with, I pray, glad and thankful hearts. Father, thankful for the life you've given us, the goodness that you overwhelm us with on a daily basis, and this wonderful opportunity to gather together as you have instructed and told us to come together as followers of Jesus, as believers, Lord, for the purpose of worship, to encounter you in the Word together, Lord, to grow and to be challenged, and Lord, to, more than anything, exalt you. Lord, thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. It is that time of the year again. We are 5 weeks away from what could possibly be called the most holy of Christian days. That is, we are 5 weeks away from Easter Sunday, from the celebration of the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ. And granted, you've heard me say this multiple times through the year, every Sunday is Resurrection Sunday. Every Sunday, we are given the opportunity to gather together and to celebrate and rejoice in the fact that Jesus Christ is alive, that He rose from the dead to vindicate and validate exactly who He is and what God has done to redeem fallen man. He is our Savior, He is our Lord, He is our God, and He is our King. That's who Jesus is, and we worship and celebrate that. We're commanded to do that, and we do that every Sunday. Or at least we should we not? But this one Sunday that is approaching, this one Sunday every spring, the first Sunday that follows the first full moon, that follows the spring equinox. That's how you calculate when Easter is. You've noticed Easter's never the same Sunday year after year after year. I mean, why can't it be like Christmas and be December 25th? You don't have to worry about trying to hunt it down, find it, and figure out when it is. Listen, that's just the way it is. Don't complain about it. Just remember, first Sunday after the first full moon, after the spring equinox, is Easter. This year, it's on Sunday, April the 9th. So 5 weeks from today, we will gather to celebrate, get this, almost exactly 2,000 years since Jesus has risen. We are very quickly approaching the 2,000th anniversary of the resurrection of Jesus. Either the year 2029 or the year 2030, which is 6 or 7 years away, will mark exactly 2,000 years. I thought Jesus rose in the year 33 A.D. Who told you that? Well, He was 30 years old, and He here 3 years, and it happened in the year 0, so, that's when it was. No, that's wrong. 29 or 30 A.D. is, in all probability, the resurrection year of Jesus Christ. So I just say that because we are right at exactly 2,000 years. I'm wondering, is that significant? I'm wondering if the concept of 1,000 years is a day is 1,000 years with God might indicate that we are approaching go for the return of Jesus? Are we in the last few years before that happens? I only have one word to say. Maranatha. Maranatha. What does that mean? Come quickly. Come on, Jesus. I'm ready to go home. These people around here are driving me crazy. Take me home. Exactly 2,000 years we are approaching since God's redemptive plan was fulfilled in the resurrection of the Lamb who was slain from before the foundation of the world. Now, something that I have observed through the years. This time of year, you can almost always count on breaking news. Someone has discovered something or come up with something or thought about something or had a dream about something, and they've got definitive evidence to debunk, to discredit, and to cast doubt on the person and work of Jesus. Sometimes it's things like the death of God theory in the 1960s. Sometimes somebody wrote a book like the Da Vinci Code, and we are popularizing bogus history that raises a question over Jesus. Sometimes it's the discovery of a new gospel, and the world goes crazy because it brings doubt upon who Jesus is. Or one year they discover an ossuary, a bone box that just happens to have the name of Yeshua and Maria and Joseph, the family of Jesus. And obviously, we have Jesus' bones here, so evidently there's reason to question what we see in Scripture. Through the years, I have noticed that angle of attack comes upon one of four major areas. I put these in your notes. You can do a little research and you'll find out, yeah, indeed, it always seems to hit one of these things. Number one, did Jesus really exist? Or is Jesus a myth? That happens occasionally. Somebody will make that proposal. There's a whole school of thought with a group of individuals, educated scholars, who call themselves mythicists. And they build the case for the fact that Jesus didn't really exist. Number two, questions deal with the cross, his death on the cross, the crucifixion, and all that went with that. Is that really a possibility for Jesus? And if it was, then there would have been no chance for Jesus to be buried and raised again, because the standard operating protocol for crucifixion was to cast the bodies into a common grave and let them just rot. And that has been suggested about Jesus. Area number three deals with the resurrection from the dead. Did Jesus really rise from the dead? Books have been written, particularly over the last 2 centuries, to raise that question. Did Jesus really rise from the dead? Number 4, was Jesus really God? Was Jesus really God? Can we really believe that a man was God? I find it quite interesting that my favorite Christian turned agnostic turned atheist, Bart Ehrman, you've heard me talk about him before, seems to write a book to popularize every skeptical idea that comes along. For instance, in 2012, he wrote a book, Did Jesus Exist? The historical argument for Jesus of Nazareth. And just to cut to the chase, yes, Bart Ehrman believed Jesus really existed. But listen to what he wrote in that book. He wrote, despite this enormous range of opinion, there are several points on which virtually all scholars of antiquity agree. Jesus was a Jewish man, known to be a preacher and a teacher, who was crucified, a Roman form of execution in Jerusalem during the reign of the Roman Emperor Tiberius, when Pontius Pilate was the governor of Judea. Even though this is the view of nearly every trained scholar on the planet, it is not the view of a group of writers who are usually labeled and often label themselves mythicists. So Ehrman himself, although a now self-proclaimed deconvert, who at one time would have considered himself to be an evangelical Christian and now is borderline full-blown atheist, says even I believe that the evidence is that Jesus really existed. 2 years later, he wrote a book on the fact that Jesus is God, or is he God? The name of that book, How Jesus Became God, the exaltation of a preacher from Galilee. Does Ehrman believe Jesus is God? No, he does not. Listen to what he writes. I started out thinking of Jesus as God the Son, equal with the Father, a member of the Trinity. But over time, I began to see Him in lower and lower terms, until finally I came to think of Him as a human being who was not different in nature from any other human being. The Christians exalted Him to the divine realm in their theology, but in my opinion, He was and always has been a human. Now, Pastor, why are you even going here and mentioning Bart Ehrman? Because Bart Ehrman is a very influential scholar in American culture. He is a best-selling author, New York Times best-selling author. His books sell millions. And he has a tremendous influence on anyone and everyone who is looking for reason to doubt or to turn away from or to not follow Jesus Christ. Am I taking a risk introducing you to someone like that? Perhaps someone here is on the borderline of being skeptical, particularly from a younger generation. Am I taking a risk? I don't think so. I'll give you more credit than that. He's too easy to counter and debunk. He operates from certain presuppositions that can easily be dealt with. Don't go looking for a reason to disbelieve. So here's a question for you. Why is the person and work of Jesus under constant attack? Why do those who profess to be atheists spend so much energy and effort to attack the God that they say does not exist? Isn't that kind of insane? I don't believe in this, so let me get you to not believe in it as well. So I'm going to give myself to discrediting the cause of Christ. Over the next 6 Sundays leading up to Easter, here's what I'm wanting to explore with you. I want to explore that last category that I just introduced to you. Was Jesus really God? Does the Bible present Jesus as deity? Did Jesus Himself ever claim to be God? Was Jesus God? I want to do so under this challenge that's issued by Pontius Pilate. I want to use this 3-word banner to challenge us to actually do what Pilate says do here. And that is, behold the man. I want to look at the biblical teaching on the person and work of Jesus Christ, particularly looking to see the evidence for who He really is. Now, you might find yourself thinking as I'm saying this, Pastor, why? Why this topic? Of course we believe that Jesus is God. That's not an issue for us. My friends, it may not be for you personally, but it is for someone you know. Perhaps someone close to you. Perhaps someone you don't really realize yet they are flirting with disaster in their life. How can I say something like that? Simple. Let me reference one more time. Hang on, we're getting to John here. I'm building the front porch again. You know how I operate. I've made reference several times since December, since it came out, to the State of Theology 2022 issued by Ligonier. In that report, which surveys thousands of Americans about what they believe concerning Christianity, the Bible, God, salvation, man, a wide variety of topics, the 3 most common mistaken beliefs held by those who profess to be American evangelicals. An evangelical is one who would say, yes, I believe the Bible, I believe God, I believe salvation. The 3 most common areas among American evangelicals where they are holding to beliefs that are wrong will shock you. Which means sitting in the church every week are people who believe these things. Not everybody, but a significant group. Number 1, Jesus is not the only way to God. He's not the only way to God. 56%, greater than half of American evangelicals affirm that God accepts worship from every religious group, including Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. In essence, what they are saying is they're all equal, they're all the same. the significant teachings of those three faith groups is not significantly different. In other words, it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you sincerely hold to what you believe. That is sincerely wrong. Number two, Jesus was created by God. Unbelievable, 73% agree that Jesus is the first and greatest being created by God. My friends, that is an ancient heresy called Arianism. A very popular heresy that the church had to deal with in the 4th century. It in essence says that Jesus was created by God, that He was not and is not an eternal being. Number three, Jesus is not God. Listen, if you believe Jesus is a created being, it's not too far down the road to come to the point to where you say He was a great teacher, but He was not God. And in American evangelicalism, in much of the group that we know as the church, 43%, nearly half say or believe or affirm the statement, Jesus was not God. That's sobering. That's striking. And by the way, those numbers are accelerating. They're increasing year by year. Are we on our way to becoming a completely godless nation? Now, let me tell you why this is important. I am seeing a church, and when I say a church, I'm not talking about the church, I'm talking about this church. Listen carefully. I am seeing a church that by the sovereignty and grace of God is being led to a generation that knows very little about Jesus, about who He is, about what He has done, and about why it matters. We are seeing in the rising generation of children and youth a generation that does not know who Jesus is. How appalling is it to live in a place like this? A dozen churches in a 2-mile radius, and the vast majority of a new generation doesn't know who Jesus is. I'm not saying they don't know what the name is. They've heard the name. They just don't know anything about Him. Here's the question. How much do we really know and believe? Are you equipped to do something about it? Are we prepared to present Jesus to a new generation? The real Jesus. In Jesus' trial here before Pontius Pilate, this Roman procurator is exasperated. He is desperate. He wants to rid himself of Jesus. Jesus has become a nuisance to Pontius Pilate. He hates the Jews. He hates the position that they have placed him in. And he wants to get rid of him. So he goes about trying to get Jesus off of his hands. He does so through a series of opportunities, trying to compromise to be done with Jesus. Listen, in the process, he's going to issue a challenge. And I don't for a minute believe he understood the importance and magnitude of this challenge. He just wants to be rid of an uncomfortable problem. So here's what I want to do. I want to take Pilate up on this invitation. In light of where we live today, in light of our cultural ethos when it comes to what we believe. And I want to look at the man Jesus. I want us to look closely as Pilate puts Him on display. And as we do, I want to consider some difficult questions with you over the next several weeks. Who is Jesus and why does it matter? Again, I know we know the language, We know the phrases Son of God, Messiah, Savior, but do we really understand what it means? Is Jesus really God? Did He claim to be God? And why does it matter? What is the biblical teaching concerning Jesus? Was Jesus a man who became God, or was Jesus God who became a man? Have you ever thought about the way that is put? Was Jesus a man who became God? You want me to go ahead and tell you that and give you the hint? No. Or was He God who condescended to become man? Why does that matter? If Jesus is God, when did He become God? And perhaps most important of all, so what? So what? What does it really matter? As long as I say I believe in Jesus, what does it really matter? It matters an eternity of difference. Here's a heads up for you. There is no more significant issue in life that you will ever face, no more important question that you will ever answer, no more important challenge than you will ever take than who is Jesus and why does it matter? Listen, if Jesus is not God, there is no good news, there is no gospel. If He is not God, His death could not possibly pay the penalty of sin that I owe. And if that's the case, I am in a world of hurt because there is no hope. He is our hope. So we need to get Jesus right. Paul called Jesus Christ in you, the hope of glory. So let's explore this and begin to look at it today. Pilate takes Jesus and scourges Him. The soldiers twist a crown of thorns and they put that thorn crown on His head. They robe Him in purple, regal, the color of royalty. They take Him, and Pilate puts Him on display, sitting Him on the judgment seat. And he will ultimately say, "Behold the man." Here's the question. What were they to behold? What was Pilate wanting them to see? And what should we see? Well, before we get to that, let's kind of set the table for this. Let me remind you of what's happened in the hours leading up to this. It's been a very long night for Jesus. He had spent the bulk of the evening before this morning preparing His disciples for what was about to happen. He would lead them to the Garden of Gethsemane. There, Jesus would anxiously, in toil, intensely, exhaustingly pray for deliverance, only to yield His will to the Father. And in the aftermath of that, Jesus would be betrayed. The kiss would come. And Jesus would be taken and He would be arrested. And in the wee hours of the morning, against all protocol in Judaism, He would begin to go through a series of trials, a total of 6. 3 Jewish phase trials, 3 Roman phase trials. The Jews want Him dead. They're building their case to have Him put to death. They make accusations that He is a threat to Rome. They accuse Him of treason by saying He claims to be a king. To which Pilate will take Him and begin the examination. But to prepare for the examination, Pilate will soften Him up. He will allow Jesus to be beaten and mistreated. And then He will engage Him in conversation. Pilate interviews Him and finds no basis for the charges leveled against Him. Certainly there's no reason to put this man to death. Yes, the accusations I hear, but there's nothing to validate the charge. So Pilate seeks to rid himself of Him. Pilate is no fool. He's done foolish things in his 3-year reign so far as procurator of Judea. But he's no fool. He quickly discerns the real issue here. The Jews simply do not like this man. They do not want to reckon with the things that he says. So the best way to eliminate somebody you don't agree with is to shut them up permanently, is it not? We have a form of that today in our cancel culture. I don't want to reckon with what you say. I don't want to deal with truth, so I'm just going to shut you down. I wonder if we're fast approaching the day when shutting down means closing them up permanently. Are we headed in that direction? Well, that's what the Jews want, and Pilate knows that. He sees nothing more than a harmless, perhaps misguided Jewish mystic. But something is unsettling with Pilate. By the way, I really believe that there are many people today who have the same problem when it comes to Jesus. You simply don't want to reckon with the real claims of Jesus. You know people like that. They don't want to deal with the implications if he is who he is presented to be in Scripture. If he's just a man, he's nothing more than a tragic figure of history. If he's a Jewish mystic or sage or wise man, he may be inspirational, but he's no less a tragic figure. Jesus is either who he said he was, worthy of your everything, or he's not worthy of anything from you. There is no middle ground. It's either or. But too many of us, being professing Christians, try to find a middle ground. We don't want to give him everything, but we don't want to abandon him. So we look for a middle ground. Much like Pilate, we want to acknowledge him, but we don't want to be beholden to him. We need, once again, to behold the man. You see, what if there's more to Jesus than meets the eye here in this picture? So Pilate looks for a way out. A series of 3 tactics. He sends first off sends Jesus to Herod Antipas. After 3 Jewish trials, the 4th one being before Pilate, the 5th one comes when he tries to get rid of him by sending him to Herod Antipas. Herod would have jurisdiction over Jesus, so he sends him to Herod, but it doesn't work. Herod sends him back. Attempt number 2 is to bargain with a substitute. I'll give you Barabbas, Bar Abba, the son of the Father, who's actually a criminal in place of the Son of God. But that doesn't work either. So he tries this last one, an appeal to pity. He has Jesus beaten beyond recognition, a procedure that often brought a man as close to death as possible without actually crossing the line. He has the soldiers on their own accord crown him with thorns. They attire him in royal colors, and they put him on display for the world to see as Pilate issues what I would call the most important challenge of his life. Hidu anthropos. Ek homo. Behold the man. Behold the man. The word behold in the text comes from a word which means to know or to see. It's an imperative, used as a command, but here used as an interjection. When he says, behold the man, what Pilate is really saying is this: don't you miss this. You look at this. You observe this. This is an observable fact. But unbeknownst to Pilate, his challenge is not an invitation to a casual glance at what meets the eye on the surface. It's actually an invitation to a life-changing gaze. There is simply no greater challenge that has ever been issued than this. Behold this man. Take a good look at this man called Jesus. Now understand something. Pilate means for this challenge to be a jab at the Jews. He's actually mocking the Jewish leaders. He is saying, would you just look at this pitiful sight? This man that you are threatened by. Look at him. He stands there a beaten, bloody mess. We have these nice artist depictions of Jesus with a little drip of blood here or a little mark here. No. The closest thing that I have seen to reality was Mel Gibson's depiction of Jesus in The Passion, where you see just incredible brutality, almost unrecognizable. It was more common than wanted that someone subjected to what Jesus was subjected to died and never made it to a cross. But Jesus did. Look at this. Look at this pitiful sight. What possible threat could he be to the Roman way of life? What possible threat do you see in him? At the command of Pilate, Jesus has been brutalized in an attempt for Pilate to elicit pity. He's counting on the Jews saying, okay, that's enough. But what Pilate did only fed their thirst more. Behold the man. So, unfortunately for Pilate, the ploy doesn't work. They manipulate and they threaten with his own sins and shortcomings. See, Pilate's reign has been short. He will wind up reigning as the procurator of Judea for 10 years, the year 26 to the year 36. 3 years in, he's having to deal with Jesus. The 3 years preceding that, he has really made some serious errors in trying to rule the Jews, including the shedding of blood, the raiding of the temple, stealing from the Jews. He is on the border of being in real trouble with Tiberius. And they're going to use that against him here. They're going to threaten him. Look, if you would, in John chapter 19, verse 12. The Jews, when Pilate puts him on display and says, behold the man, and then yet they cry out even more for Jesus to be put to death. Pilate is going to hear some more information, which we'll get to in just a moment. But in the aftermath of that, Pilate is pushed to the brink. As a result of this, Pilate made efforts to release him, but the Jews cried out, saying, if you release this man, you are no friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar. What the Jews are saying here is, listen, you give us what we want or your history. You've made enough mistake to where we can be done with you. So they're going to manipulate him, they're going to blackmail him to get what they want, which is the death of Jesus. So Pilate's on the edge for his past indiscretions. If the Jews revolt, Pilate is history. So Pilate's in a precarious position. Pilate reminds me of a poem written by the Civil War poet James Russell Lowell. James Russell Lowell wrote this in the context of the Civil War. He said, once for every man and nation comes the moment to decide, in the strife of truth with falsehood, for the good or evil side. Sooner or later, you're going to have to come face to face in striving to make a decision in the strife between what's true and what's false. That's where Pilate is. It's that moment of decision. Is it truth or is it evil? And Pilate makes his decision. He decides for evil. How sad is it that he failed his own challenge to rightly behold the man? All he sees is a pitiful, bloody mess. And he decides wrongly. Now, I want you to notice something here. Did you notice Pilate's reaction as you read through this text when he puts out the challenge to behold the man and the Jews cry for blood and they give us the reason why, the real reason why? They finally are honest. Look at John chapter 19, verses 6, 7, and 8. When the chief priest and the officers saw him, they cried out, saying, crucify, crucify. To which Pilate said, you take him, you crucify him. He's not guilty of anything. I find no guilt in him. To which the Jews answer, and I really believe they answer in anger. We have a law. This man has violated our law. By all right, he deserves to die. And here's why. He has said he's the Son of God. And when Pilate hears that, he becomes afraid. The text says even more afraid. There's this undercurrent of fear with Pilate already. Fear that he's going to mishandle yet another issue. But actually it's more than that. In the process of all of this, his wife has sent word to him. How interesting that it's not given to us by John, but by Matthew, a more Jewish perspective. But the wife of Pilate sends word to him in Matthew 27:18. While he's sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sends him a message saying, have nothing to do with that righteous man. Last night I suffered greatly in a dream because of him. So the pieces are coming together for Pilate. The Jews say he's broken our law. He claims to be God. By the way, what are they talking about? They're talking about Leviticus 24:16. In Leviticus chapter 24, beginning in verse 13, the Lord spoke to Moses saying, bring the one who has cursed outside the camp. Let all who heard him lay their hands on him. Then let the congregation stone him. Let them put him to death. You shall speak to the sons of Israel, saying, if anyone curses his God, then he will bear his sin. Moreover, the one who blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall certainly stone him, the alien as well as the native. It doesn't matter who you are. If you blaspheme the name of God, you deserve to die. In their mind, Jesus has done just that. In claiming to be God, he claims the impossible, that a man could be or become God. So they say he deserves to die. The real problem, the real accusation, the real issue is a theological issue. He claims an intimacy with God so as to be equal with God. Yes, did Jesus ever claim to be God? He most certainly did. In fact, in the Gospel of John, on multiple occasions, the Pharisees get so bent out of shape they try to kill him because they understand what he is saying to be a claim to being God. We're going to look at that over the weeks coming up. Here's the real question. What did Pilate hear? How did he understand it? When they said he claims to be God and it frightened him, what was he really hearing? He was hearing with Roman ears. Romans were particularly superstitious when it came to religion and the gods. So someone who would claim to be the Son of God would imply at the very least a holy man with divine powers, but perhaps even more. The Romans believed that the gods had offspring with humans. Could this be a God walking the face of the earth? If that's the case, Pilate is frightened. He's in a precarious situation. He must choose wisely. But he doesn't. Now remember something. Pilate is in a position that every one of us is in eventually. You have to decide who Jesus is and what you're going to do with him. It's not enough to affirm that he may be the Son of God. It's not enough to affirm that he died for you. It's not enough to agree with biblical teaching. What do you do with that? You can't just add it like a badge that you've worn or won. You have to actually live in light of that. In other words, Jesus will make a difference. He will make all the difference in your life. Pilate is like so many today, even many who sit in churches week after week. 3 words describe him. Number 1, he was religious. He knew the language. You say, Pastor, he's a pagan Roman. Yes, and he was religious. The most religious people are the most adamant agnostics and atheists. You say, they're not religious. They don't believe in anything. Oh, no, they do. Their God is themselves, their intellect, their will, what they want. By the way, many Christians are nothing more than practical atheists. We say, yes, I believe, but then we live as if it makes no difference whatsoever. That's why we are facing a generation today who does not know who Jesus is. They're not religious. They're superstitious. That's the second word. Pilate is superstitious. He fails to grasp the significance of the one standing before him as he issues that challenge, behold the man. Pilate fails to behold the man, but he's very superstitious because when he hears of the religious claims of Jesus, it frightens him. And he works even harder to not have anything to do with Jesus. He will eventually go to the point of washing his hands of the situation. Don't you like that phrase? I wash my hands of it. Have you ever said that? Did you realize when you were saying it, you were imitating Pilate? Washing your hands of it? By the way, did Pilate really wash his hands of it? No. And neither will you. Because in addition to being religious and superstitious, he's foolish. Yes, he's superstitious. By the way, we've got a lot of superstitious people. You're going to see it here in the next few weeks. They too are going to fail to grasp the significance of Jesus, the cross, and Easter. They're going to celebrate Easter because religious superstitious protocol dictates it. But they've added other things to their religious superstitions that go with Easter. They're going to add in all kinds of, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not even going to talk about it. No, there's nothing wrong with things like that. Eating the ears off of a chocolate bunny is one of my favorite things to do. But I'm not superstitious about it. I don't believe if I don't eat the bunny's ears, bad things are going to happen to me. And I'm not going to hunt eggs, but if you want to hunt eggs, you go ahead and hunt them. The problem is when that becomes so ingrained as a superstitious ritual that you associate it with Easter to the degree you can't separate it, you don't know what Easter is anymore. That's where we are. We're a religious, superstitious culture, but more than anything, we're a foolish culture because we don't truly behold the man. Pilate never came to the point to behold the man. He never truly looked closely at Jesus. There was enough evidence for Pilate to come to the right conclusion, and yet he came to the wrong conclusion. Is Jesus really God? And why does it matter? Over the coming weeks, we're going to ask some difficult questions, but we're going to come up with some good answers necessary for you to engage the next generation. And my friends, the next generation needs to be engaged. But God's people must be grounded in what we believe. We've got to know the person and work of Jesus because somebody's eternity is hanging in the balance. So get ready. We're going to behold the man, who he is, why he matters. Father, thank you this morning for the opportunity to behold the man. Lord, as we prepare to go on this journey to look at difficult questions that the culture asks, that our children ask, that our grandchildren will ask, give us, Father, a passion for truth and a capacity to be able to not only address truth, but defend truth. It begins in our own lives personally with a relationship with you through Jesus Christ, the very Son of God who took upon himself our flesh, who became like us that we might know life. He identified with us fully. He became sin. The one who knew no sin became sin that we might become his righteousness. He did that by humbling himself on a cross, despising the shame, paying our sin debt, satisfying your just judgment. And then, Father, you raised him up bodily, victoriously. that changes everything for us. Father, help us to behold the man and change our lives. In Jesus' name we pray.